Turn it up. Oh, I can see it. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to keep my water bottle here because I don't go anywhere without my water bottle. And I would also like to thank Marie for that beautiful prayer. And I definitely feel like Corvallis is a family. And I have been at the Corvallis Church now for 4 years, and I've gotten to meet a lot of people. And I haven't gotten to meet a lot more people, but yeah, my name is Madison, and I am married to Derek Gorton, and he's been here, he grew up in this church, so we have a really special place here at Corvallis. So when I was very young, I remember coming into a Sabbath school room, and my teacher had brought in this miniature version of a tabernacle, and I looked at it, and I was like, this looks really weird. And I asked my teacher, I'm like, what is this? And she's like, oh, it's a tabernacle, and we're going to be studying it for the next couple of weeks. I was like, this is going to be so boring. And sure enough, we started studying it, and the words felt confusing, and there were lots of clause and rules that sounded weird. And even now, I'm well aware that I have only scratched the surface of everything that is to be gleaned about the tabernacle and all of what that means for today. But I invite you to come with me to see the tabernacle with you guys. I forgot the clicker. Alright, so I'm sure that many of you have had the experience of starting to read the Bible from the very beginning, Genesis 1:1, with the honorable intention of making it all the way through the Bible, front to back. And it starts out going pretty great. There's lots of action-packed adventure and meaningful stories through Genesis, and even into the beginning of Exodus. But then, as soon as the people of Israel make it out of Egypt, all of a sudden, it comes to a screeching halt, and you're slapped in the face with lists upon lists of rules and commandments. It can leave you wondering, what just happened? And even feeling the urge to skip ahead until you get to a story that's a little bit more exciting. Well, today I encourage you to not skip over this section of the Bible. When viewed through the lens of Jesus, this seemingly endless list of instructions turns from a confusing list of legalities into a beautiful picture of Christ and God's relationship with a broken people. It was the beginning of an era. Abraham's family, now known as the people of Israel, were finally free from the oppression of Egypt, where they had been slaves for 400 years. God met with Moses and provided Israel with special instructions on how to live and behave as his chosen people. These instructions we know famously as the Ten Commandments. However, while on Mount Sinai, Moses was also given instructions for many, many other things. This collection of laws and regulations provided a framework for how the nation of Israel would run its government. However, instead of having a king or single human figurehead, they were to recognize God as their wise ruler and instructor. In order to mediate the conversations between God and his people, Israel was to have a designated group of priests and a special occasion called the tabernacle in which these conversations were to take place. The actual meaning of tabernacle is God with us in Hebrew. The laws were to be assigned to other nations that these people were special and that their God was more powerful than any of the other gods that they worshipped, as well as a way for the people to draw closer to God. The instructions for how to build the tabernacle, its furnishings, which people and things were allowed to enter it, and what types of actions were performed there, were in large part the additional instructions provided with the Ten Commandments. Okay, so we're going to explore the structure of the tabernacle a little bit so that we can learn the meaning of a lot of what it represents. So, as you can see right around here, there is dividing the entire complex from the rest of the Israelite community. From a practical point of view, this is just a temple. But as you can see, there are multiple rooms, and there is an outer courtyard with the altar of burnt offerings, right? Oops. Right here is the altar of burnt offerings. Here is a wash basin in the outer courtyard, and this is the holy place, which was the next level closer to God. And then the table of showbread, the candle or lampstand, the altar of incense, and then the veil, a big thick curtain, the Ark of the Covenant. And this is the holiest place in the tabernacle for the glory of God to dwell. This tabernacle was meant to be a picture of Eden, because it was a place where heaven and earth united, where God was able to talk with humans once again after they had been separated from sin. So when looking at the tabernacle through the eyes of an Israelite, there are many aspects of the tabernacle that appear to point to Eden and an innocent creation. In the Israelites' view of creation, there existed 3 tiers. The first tier being the skies. The second tier included the land, animals, trees, and humans. And the third tier was the sea. The tabernacle's outermost court, this one, represented the third tier of creation, which was the sea. And it also represents the land and chaos outside of the Garden of Eden. The next court in is the holy place. This area represents the second tier of creation, with the land, the trees, the animals, and humans. And as we'll see, the trees are represented with the lampstand, and the animals represented with the cherubim and beautiful tapestries and images in the curtains, and the priests were to be symbolic of humans in Eden. It also represents the beauty and perfection that existed in the Garden of Eden. The Holy of Holies represents the third tier of creation, the heavens. It also represents the mountain of safety and God's presence that was in the middle of the garden. So we will walk through together each of the furnishings, the most notable furnishings in the tabernacle, and how they represent Jesus. The symbolic Eden has so many more symbols than that, but these are ones that I feel especially point to Jesus and a hope for restoration of heaven and earth existing together. So, starting in the outermost court, we have the bronze wash basin and the bronze altar. The wash basin was used for priests to wash their hands and feet before beginning any ceremonies. The wash basin was made from finely polished bronze mirrors, and this is a beautiful image of what Christ does for us. When we are washed by his blood, we are cleansed from our sin and become a reflection of God, restored to our original image. The bronze altar was used for animal sacrifice according to the instructions that were given for sacrifices in Leviticus. Paul makes a bold statement in 1 Corinthians 5:7 that Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. And Isaiah predicted that the Messiah would be a suffering servant who would be like a lamb led to the slaughter. Now, as a note, bronze is thought to be a symbol for sin. This is very appropriate for these two symbols, which deal directly with the fact that in the outer courtyard, which represents the earth outside of Eden, there is an abundance of sin, which we must be cleansed of in order to come closer to God. This material is in contrast to the materials that are found in other areas of the tabernacle, which we will explore next. The golden lampstand, table of showbread, and altar of incense. In the next room of of the tabernacle, these three main furnishings are held. These were all made of gold, symbolizing the perfection of God. The lampstand represents an eternal light shining forward, and as John describes multiple times, and Jesus even describes himself, Jesus is the light of the world and casts out darkness.
Amen.
The table of showbread was overlaid in gold, indicating Jesus' godliness, but was made of acacia wood, which represented his humanness. The bread that is on the table is called the bread of the presence, and symbolizes, you guessed it, Jesus' presence. There are 2 stacks of 6, representing the 12 tribes of Israel, and the bread symbolizing Jesus' flesh. Additionally, frankincense, which is an extremely valuable oil both in the past and today, was to be poured over the bread before it was offered. This strikes in me the memory of a huge similarity when Mary came during the Passover meal that Jesus was eating with his disciples and anointed him with very expensive perfume as a symbolic burial preparation before his death or sacrificial offering. In addition to the bread, there was also to be other bowls and dishes to pour out wine as a liquid offering. And since Jesus tells us that the wine is a symbol of his blood, we can draw the conclusion from there. The altar of incense represents the prayers of Israel rising up to God, as well as the mediation that Jesus provides between heaven and earth. Something that I found interesting as well was that the lampstand was to be burning at all times, never to burn out, while the bread of the presence was to be replaced every 7 days, and the incense was to be burned once in the morning and once in the evening. To me, this points to the fact that Jesus is ever-present light when it feels dark. He is mediating for us every second of every day and is making us a new creation, just like the 7-day cycle in the very beginning, and by sacrificing himself for us.
Amen.
So now we've made it into the most holy place. The Ark of the Covenant was located in the Holy of Holies, an area separated from even the most holy place by a thick curtain. This special box throne, as I'm calling it, was specially designed to hold artifacts from Israelites' journey through the wilderness and serve as a dwelling place for God Almighty. Inside of the box were held the second set of the 10 Commandments, a jar of manna, and Aaron's budded staff. So, first of all, Jesus can be found in these items because he fully upheld the law. Matthew 5:17-18 says, "Don't misunderstand why I have come. I did not come to abolish the law of Moses or the writings of the prophets. No, I came to accomplish their purpose. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not even the smallest detail of God's law will disappear until its purpose is achieved."
Amen.
Secondly, he was the manna from heaven. Jesus says in John, "I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, and they died. This is the bread that comes from heaven, so that one may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh." Lastly, the budded staff of Aaron represents that he was appointed by God. Aaron had to be chosen by God to be the royal priesthood line of Israel, and Jesus is our royal priest. On the outside of this box throne, the Ark of the Covenant, were 2 cherubim, which were meant to symbolize the cherubim that guarded Eden in Genesis. But I also believe that it represents the angels that were in Jesus' tomb after his resurrection. This would also be fitting because Christ's perfectly sinless, appointed body, manna, would be symbolically entombed and guarded by the cherubim. It is also fitting because Christ's body is the real place where heaven and earth unite, just as the Ark of the Covenant All right, so now we get to the priests. Therefore, it was necessary for him to be made in every respect like us, his brothers and sisters, so that he could be our merciful and faithful high priest before God. Then he could offer a sacrifice that would take away the sins of the people. The priests in the government of Israel were given special garments that were meant to both set them apart and protect them from dying while they were offering sacrifices to the Lord. The way that I think about this is really similar to something that I deal with on a daily basis. I work in different labs that both handle plant tissues and human tissues. In order to keep the purity of the samples and protect myself from the samples, there is a special process that takes place. This process is especially important when I'm handling human tissues. It starts with entering into the laboratory. The laboratory is a special place designated only for doing laboratory work. No outside food or drink are allowed. It is just a laboratory. Then you put on lab coats, gloves, and sometimes even safety goggles or masks. I also work in something called a biological safety cabinet, which is shown there. It's a fancy machine, basically, that provides a barrier between you and the sample. This allows you to maintain the purity of the sample so that you don't contaminate it with any bacteria that you might have, and it keeps it from coming and entering you and making you sick. In order for this environment to be completely sterile, I must also autoclave, or sterilize, anything that goes into the hood, either with intense heat or alcohol. I think of a lab worker as being similar to a high priest. They have a special set of clothing that sets them apart from other people and workers, which also provides protection. They must purify anything that enters into the most sterile place, and they are only able to enter into the sterile field once they have been sterilized themselves. Jesus wasn't just trying to be sterile enough to work outside the cabinet. He was fully pure enough to take away our filth and contamination and allow us to have access to the most precious place without hindrance. The curtain was a symbol of division, and when the veil was torn, humans were reunited with God's presence. And Mark says this really beautifully. Then Jesus uttered another loud cry and breathed his last, and the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn in two, from top to bottom. I'm so thankful that Jesus came to be our high priest, our sacrifice, and ultimately removing the division that used to exist between us, where earth couldn't fully come into contact with God, and God couldn't fully pervade the earth. And when Jesus died, that separation was completely gone. It's just a beautiful image of freedom and a hope for restoration. So, as I said a little bit, Jesus is so well represented by the things that are in the tabernacle. I kind of think of the tabernacle as a prediction of who Jesus would be, because he is present in the wash basin. He is present in the symbol of the altar. He's present as a lampstand, a table of showbread, the incense and the olive oil, and the different garments of the priests even. So, yeah. In the New Testament, we can confirm the connections we've been making. Jesus clearly identifies his own body as being a temple. He is suggesting that he is the place where heaven and earth meet. With Jesus' sacrifice, we too are able to become temples for the Lord. 1 Corinthians 3:16 says, "Don't you realize that all of you together are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God lives in you?" And 1 Corinthians 6:19-20 says, "Don't you realize that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, who lives in you and was given to you by God? You do not belong to yourself, for God bought you with a high price. so you must honor God with your body. Jesus teaches us to pray that God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Knowing that we are temples joining heaven and earth, we have a new identity and a new mission: to show others the incredible sacrifice that Christ gave for us, to be generous with forgiveness, and to not tolerate injustice. So we have a hope for restoration.
Amen.
There are many, many, many more symbols that are within the concept of the tabernacle, but these are just a few that I chose to share with you. I encourage you to look at these kinds of things in the Bible, the ones that seem boring and maybe even antiquated, with the idea of finding a new treasure. These things don't have to be boring, and once you see a little bit of what's going on just beneath the surface, you'll want to keep digging for more. I hope that it was evident that even in the Old Testament, the image of Jesus uniting heaven and earth, and that the tabernacle was a physical representation and prediction of who Jesus would be.
Yeah.
I also hope that this makes you feel confident that the system with which God rules creation is one that is full of love and self-sacrifice, and that He wants to bring unity, not division, to the world. As we enter into a political season, Derek and I watched the debate on Thursday, we can know that without a shadow of a doubt, God's way of governing is full of peace and prosperity and unity, and that we are given the gift of being priests and temples in that system of government. We have the opportunity to show others what God's system of governing is like by showing them love and forgiveness in our everyday life. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the gift of your Son, who came to be our high priest and mediator to reunite us with you. Just as Jesus was an image of the temple, help us to be temples that point others to you. We thank you for your deep generosity and forgiveness, and ask for your continued mercies every day. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.